rights. You gotta stand up for your rights. Stand up. Stand up for your rights. Come on, you get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Stand up. Stand up for your rights. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the podcast for the Aotearoa Legalised Cannabis Party, the ALLCAPS podcast. And today we have the Legalised Cannabis Party's president, Stephen Wilkinson. Stephen, good morning.
Good morning, Vinny. How are you?
Somewhat fabulous.
Good to hear.
The question on everybody's mind is, who are you people, right? Because when you're looking at political parties, you don't understand who these people are, where they come from, and what they've done. Why are they here now? That kind of thing. So I was wondering about you, Stephen. Could you give us a bit of a background?
Yeah, sure, Vinny. That feels a bit like a dating service, doesn't it? My name is Stephen Wilkinson. I was born in New Zealand in Picton. I spent 20 years of my early life in Australia, and got a bit of a view of over there, but the calling for home came, and so I came back home. When I came back home, I was really interested in the politics of New Zealand, and I didn't know much about New Zealand because you hear nothing of New Zealand in Australia. And so I had a look around, and the only party I saw of any worth was AOTEAROA Legalised Cannabis Party, and so they started getting my vote. In about 2004, I decided I'd jump on board and become a candidate for ALCP because I saw they were the only people that were being honest. They had a goal, they wanted to achieve it, and they weren't giving up. And when you look at politics and politicians and the amount of lying and the horse trading that happens in that industry, it was nice to see that there were some people that had an honest goal that would help normal New Zealanders. So that's how I got into ALCP. As a person, I'm 58 years old. I have 3 sons. I live in an amazing place in New Zealand, a place called Golden Bay. I'm sure some people have heard it. It's just an awesome place to be. Jeepers weepers, active in the community. I like to make sure that where I live is a nice place, so I keep focused on the community and learning to.
Well, it talks about the rest of the. It's about the rest of the community as well, because you're not just serving the Legalised Cannabis Party cause. In fact, you've done a lot of volunteer work in a number of sectors, haven't you?
Yes, I have. Because I think it's important that the truth of cannabis gets out. And the only way to do that is to be an active voice. So since I think about 2003, I've been writing extensively to newspapers on the ills of prohibition. And when I saw in the newspapers articles that put cannabis in an untruthful light, I would write a letter to put the information out there, because I felt that people read papers, they see these things, and then they take those lies on as a truth because they don't know the real facts. So I thought it was important. And I got a lot of support with my letters campaign. I've gone up against Helen Clark, Peter Dunn, these sort of people about cannabis, but I always keep the honesty going. I think it's important to do that.
Do you feel that other parts of the community need serving besides the cannabis cause? I mean, have you volunteered anywhere before?
Living in such a small community, any issue that arises is normally polarizes the community. At the moment, we're dealing with an issue of we have a grandstand here, which was built by the AMP organisation over 100 years ago. People sat in that grandstand and watched soldiers march past before they went off to war. So this grandstand has history in the community, but through a wee bit of deceit, the grandstand now is sort of been marked to be pulled down, and for no good reason. So the community at the moment is fighting the grandstand. I'm on the grandstand side because, for me, I believe in the rural sectors of New Zealand. If you don't hold that the history of the region, the history of that community, then that community dies. I mean, I've driven through towns in New Zealand, rural sectors, and you look at it, and the place has no heart. It's died. And I think it's important to keep the heart of a community in a small rural town or region. You need to keep that history. You need to keep the history alive. So, yep, I'll get in there and I'll fight any injustice I see in the community. It's important.
Well, it seems to me as well that the legalisation of cannabis might benefit rural communities quite substantially because of the capacity for profit from that particular thing. And, you know, where the money flows, people will go. And what's interesting about urbanisation is that it's on a cutting point now where it's possible to reverse such things, but only if there was economically viable work available in the rural areas and people could have a...
Yes, you're right. One of the first things because not only have I stood for AOTEAROA Legalised Cannabis Party in some elections, I've actually stood as an independent. I've always believed if we're going to regulate cannabis in New Zealand, there has to be part of that regulation where you can have boutique growers, sort of like microbreweries we have in the alcohol industry. But if we have boutique growers, then what you can have in these small rural regions, you can have locals could be growing cannabis to be sold at outlets in that region. So basically the money that is going to purchase the cannabis stays in the community, which I think is very important. I'd hate to see New Zealand have a regulation regime where there was only one or two big places that were growing cannabis for a lot of outlets, and then that money was going to those industries, and those industries might even be owned by overseas interests. I would like to see a market where there is a section safely put aside, so if some individual wants to buy himself a license to grow cannabis, to sell to his local outlets in his region, or her region, then I think that's important. Grassroots marketing we still need for cannabis.
It seems corporatisation is something that is threatened by the very idea of a plant that is literally a growable, a valued resource. I mean, even the waste products from cannabis are highly, highly sought after overseas in their raw form.
Oh, right. I was going to say waste products. Is there any waste products when it comes to cannabis? I mean, you're making medicine from the roots. You're making rope and clothing from the fiber. You're making antiseptic from the leaves. You're making medicine from the CBD and the THC within the plant itself. You're making food from the seed. You're making diesel from the seeds. There's so many things that you're making. I don't know. I don't actually think there's a waste product of the plant. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't.
Hence why it's so highly sought after.
Exactly. I would call it the one and only planet's multi-use plants. I can't think of any other plant that has that many uses or more than one or two uses at all.
Yeah.
Cannabis is it.
How many plants got 25,000 uses on record, conservatively?
I know one. Cannabis. Cannabis.
Yeah.
Would the answer be cannabis? Yes.
Yeah. That and magic mushrooms, but that's getting onto a different playing field there.
Yes, and I haven't seen many people. Wearing magic mushrooms.
No. But the magic mushrooms might make them wear something very strange. Now, the other element here that we got to be concerned about is the corporatization of the cannabis products themselves, because, as you say, this cottage industry and boutique growers, this is an important thing to maintain, essentially a form of community sovereignty. Now, if a community is strong, if all the communities are strong, then the country's strong, essentially. It starts from the ground
A
up.
country is made up by communities.
it starts from the ground up, essentially, and on that grassroots level, there has got to be local suppliers, local growers, and things of that nature. Now, there's on-flow effects from that of an economic nature. For instance, you no longer have overt shipping costs to cart a container load of cannabis products and what have you down the line. And I was thinking about this kind of element between how people are housed currently. A lot of people talk about the housing crisis. Well, let's say you got a free house because you grew a couple of acres of hemp, more or less, and that's all your building materials you need, right? What if every New Zealander deserved...
Oh, you need more than that. You need windows and wood to build the frame.
Well, it's the basics of it. Is you can indeed create homes very, very cheaply if cannabis is involved, because of the fact
exactly.
that
you could even use use it for insulation as well. So yeah, and it cuts down the cost of production of a house. You're correct.
Yeah, and then there's the processing to think about, and always wondering in my little mind about little community projects. What if there was a community mill where you can just bring in your hemp that you grow, and do you need fibre for some clothing, or do you need fibre compressed together for some kind of fireproof doors, or do you need a car paneling sort of thing? Because of the nature of manufacturing these days, it seems to be tending towards 3D printing, and I thought the greatest idea ever was to have a plant that you can turn into $25,000, 25,000 industrial products in a 3D printer,
Well, yes, but I mean, when you're getting back to your point about corporates running things, it is sadly, everyone is an entrepreneur in a way, and they go, oh, I can make money, and what their motivation is the greed of money, and that's sad, because the people who miss out are the people on the street. And I think moving forward, especially because we're going towards a referendum, we need to ensure that we push and demand that there is a community grassroots based market for cannabis, as well as whatever's going to pop up in the flash units in the middle of the capital cities and other centres. But for the rural sections, it should be able to. I mean, the thing is, you, in the rural sections, and especially places like Coromandel and other cannabis growing areas, you've got some damn good growers. You've got some people who have a passion for growing, who have a passion for this, maintaining old heirloom strains, have a lot of passion with the industry of cannabis, and I would hate to see that just disappear because corporates took over the cannabis market totally. That'd be just like having to drink Tui's all the time.
People talk about it in a very general way. They talk about corporate takeover in a very general way, but I'm talking about something far more specific, and that is corporate red tape coming through the government side of things, because nobody wants cannabis laws that basically strangle local businesses with red tape while cutting it for the big mega interests that are the campaign financiers.
Yep. No, I agree. Red tape is it's the bane of everyone's life, and it's not needed. It's basically just creates and generates jobs for people who don't really need to be there. Just like busy work for people, just giving them shiny bums on their seats. It's simple. You can make a simple model, and I'm surprised the government hasn't actually reached out and started asking people in the cannabis reform movement for advice or for direction or even suggestions. You're hearing nothing. All we hear is, there's going to be a referendum. No one knows what the referendum is going to be. No one knows who's involved in it. No one knows, is there a committee to organise it? There's nothing. I don't know anything. I mean, you might know. I mean, hear nothing from Normal. Just Normal, no one seems to know anything. It's sort of like we're promised this thing. Yes, it's coming, but no one even knows what the question is even going to be.
And that silence is deafening, and
Totally definitely.
It's a
it
big,
worries me. It worries me.
Yeah, it is. It is a thing to worry about, I do believe, because in my experience, being on talk radio and alternative media for like close to 10 years here, any issue that the government remains silent on is a bad sign.
you know you're getting screwed, eh? If you hear nothing from the government, you know you're getting screwed.
Yeah, and so that's why they can then spring it on you at the last minute, really terribly, and you get angry for a little bit, and then they placate you with some BS, like a royal wedding or something, and then you just go back to voting for them as usual. You forget what they did to you.
Well, that's it. And when they do this, and you know, and I know, it's probably not going to be satisfactory, and we won't be happy with it. But what you're going to hear from like the Greens, and they go, "Oh yes, but it's a move forward. It's okay. It just doesn't matter. We can change it in the future," which is such a stupid political strategy which politicians use with each other. It's like, you know, Nationals want something done and they need the votes, or Labor wants something done, they'll go to a small party and say, support us now with this, and down the track we'll help you out. You know, and most of the time that doesn't happen. So I think that we should be strong about what we want the referendum to say. ALCP wants to see cannabis removed from the Misuse of Drugs Act and regulated. And we would like to see a community-based or market, a boutique market. I use the word boutique. You can use, you know, micro marketing. I don't know what you want to use, but
micro growery.
Michael Growery, that's it, basically. I mean, I got friends in this area. They would love to be able to produce a wee bit of cannabis, which I mean, and you know it's good because these people aren't doing it for greed. They're doing it for a love. Because one thing, I'm not a gardener, but one thing I've noticed in my life is that anybody who grows cannabis loves the plant. They go up to it, they sniff it, they talk to it. I mean, no one does that to tomatoes, no one does that to cabbages, but people do that to cannabis because they have a relationship with that plant. From the time they put that seed in the ground, that plant grows with them, and for 14, 16 weeks, and then it's harvested, and that love is given into that plant. Only plant I've ever seen that people do that to. It's amazing, I think.
It's a spiritual thing on.
It's definitely spiritual.
The same token, as well as just a, hey, this is actually worth quite a bit because it's illegal. Maybe I better take care of this sort of thing, and maybe then I can profit from my grows and what have you. And this is the other thing, that whole greed is good argument. It works to a point. And it seems to me that the society that is being created around us by the media to a large degree, it doesn't want people to be showing love for what they want to do. They want you to show love for people who tell you what to do.
Yes. And they don't want you having access to something that's going to make you question things in your life. Question about why something's done that way. Why is it not done another way?
That happens to me sometimes. Actually, I'll just have had I'll just have had a really, really big couple of spots, right? And I'll be thinking to myself about something that I said or something I did a long time ago that was really embarrassing or really foolish, and I would I would feel disgraced, right? All I did was have a session, think about something randomly that happened years and years ago, and I felt bad about it. Now, imagine for a moment that the part of the reason why a lot of the politicians don't feel bad about the things they do is because they haven't had a smoke regularly, mate.
Yeah, that's probably what they need. I mean, rather than rushing down to Ballabs and having a few handles before you go into question time, maybe sit back and have just a joint with other politicians, and then go in and be relaxed, and then deal with question time. Maybe we'll get some more honest answers instead of blustering and bullshit.
Relaxed, interested politicians.
I know.
Or...
I know. I have to pinch myself. Maybe I'm I'm just dreaming, hey?
Well, I mean, I just think about the current alternative that is basically the default setting, and it reminds me of something the former co-leader Jeff Lye said. Somebody asked him, "What makes you stoners think that you can run the country well?" And he says to her, "Well, you pissheads haven't been doing a very good job."
No, and what a good response. Yay to Jeff for that response. That's awesome. It's good to be honest. You know, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be PC. I'd rather people be honest, because honest is a better thing to be than change what you believe because you're scared you might offend one or two people who's listening.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, the thing that we're advocating hasn't caused 40% of weekend homicides like alcohol has.
No, I know that. It's just alcohol is such a destructive drug, and cannabis seems to be the opposite. And yes, it does have adverse effects in some people, but most people who have those effects, not all of them, but most people have those effects, don't touch it again. And I know that because when I campaign, you run into certain types of people when you're talking about cannabis. And I always know when I've met somebody who's tried cannabis and they're freaked out because they have this terrified look in their face, and all they can say is, "Oh, no one should feel the way I felt." And that's why I don't think it should be legal, because they feel they're protecting people, because they feel that everybody who tries cannabis will feel the way they did, which is not true. Cannabis only adversely affects very few people. Most people just enjoy the experience, and it just makes them better people.
It often makes them have self-analysis. So what's interesting is that there's a correlation between people who lack self-analysis and them not liking cannabis. So essentially, let's say they heard voices in their head, "Bro, you're actually a bit of a dick. Stop being such an asshole." And then they go, oh my God, that freaked me out. I don't want to hear that anymore. I don't want it.
Yeah, I'm not ready to accept the fact that I am an asshole. Yep. No, that's true. So let's just get drunk, hey? And then that voice will just tell you how cool you really are and how everyone loves arseholes.
You're an asshole, stop talking.
Yeah, it's just a funny world out there. But I mean, you know, getting back on topic a bit, I would like people to do their own research on cannabis and see the benefits. And it's like, okay, cannabis is not good for young people, but then you have to look at the fact, if you're looking at medicinally, if you have a condition or an ailment, age doesn't dictate that. So if you are epileptic and you're 3 years old, yep, CBD is good for you.
That's one of the most important points, actually, I feel that needs to be raised in the cannabis discussion is, number one, your elders. They're sick, they're dying, they're suffering. Cannabis can help them. It's still illegal.
On many levels.
And number two, the very, very young children with congenital conditions and children with autism and things like that have seizures all the time and that get helped by cannabis and they stop having seizures. You know, it's the elders and the children who can't defend themselves. Basically, the most helpless in society are those who are disproportionately affected by cannabis's legal status at the moment.
Yes, and also the fact that if you are unlucky to be a parent who has a child who has seizures, you don't have to mortgage your house to pay for the medicine to stop those seizures, because you know that you'll do anything to get medicine for your child. And if you can get that same medicine for the cost of a seed, why should you be paying $1,200?
And that's also one of the other interesting and frustrating things about the alleged, and I mean in air quotes here, medical cannabis that's available in New Zealand, which is essentially a extracted Sativex thing, which costs $500 a month. Right? It's essentially, hey, if you're really, really wealthy, we can give you some really low-grade crap that's ridiculously expensive and it kind of will work, but...
well, no, actually, no, it doesn't kind of work. As far as I can tell, it has to be a placebo effect, because the fact is, if you go to the company that makes Sativex's Facebook or website page, they will say on that if a patient exceeds their daily dose of Sativex, it will not show up on a saliva test. So that tells me there's sweet or THC in that. So if you're getting a little tiny bit of a buzz, you go, oh yeah, I can feel something that's got to be working. It might not be, and the fact is, it is not, because the thing with cannabis, because it's so safe and has such a high level before it even becomes unsafe, it's a ridiculous level. I'm going to have to change that again if that's okay. If you look at how much cannabis you would have to take to kill yourself, you realize that there's impossible. So if you're using cannabis for medicinal reasons, you should rather overdose the dosage rather than underdose. If you underdose, all it is a placebo. Overdosing it is going to do the job. I mean, you look at Rick Simpson's oil. It's just hash oil. And you build that increase up until you get that tolerance. So you can take enough THC into your system to combat cancer.
Indeed, and I may actually get Rick Simpson on the podcast here. I've had him on my own radio show a number of times, and we have a great chat. So it'll be good to get his take on the New Zealand cannabis situation, as well as some other international voices who can weigh in with some credibility, because there have been many successes overseas, and we again say alleged successes, because what's problematic is that when you see a success, sometimes you read into it and it's not what it says it is. And it seems to me, although they've been having some, alleged success, there isn't really a whole bunch of that trickling down to neighbouring countries, I don't think. And it seems that if anybody would know the benefits of legalised cannabis, it would be people living in places where it already has been legalised.
Exactly, and maybe it might be a good challenge for you, Vinny, to see if you can get to speak to somebody of some governmental authority in Colorado and interview them and ask them how it's going for their state. Because, I mean, Colorado's population is similar to New Zealand, so, so you're looking at that sort of comparison. It's sort of apples with apples in a way.
Well, we have a very, very high suicide rate, and in my recollection, when they legalised, their suicide rate went down. And that's because the people started trying to kill themselves with cannabis, and it just didn't work. It just didn't work.
That's a bit unfair to say that.
I'm just joking.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, what it was that people were able to obtain the strain that they needed medicinally. With sativa is great for uplifting. So if you're feeling depressed, that's a great strain for that. Where indica is more body and quite internal. So if you are suffering from depression, maybe indica is not the strain to use.
Yeah, and those are Sanskrit words, indica and sativa. One means evening and one means afternoon.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. One gets you up and going around, and the other one relaxes you and puts you down. Okay. Oh.
Yeah, well, I've always used to explain to people as indica is a sort of like a nice red wine to have at the end of the day. And
I think in India, like, this is it's literally in their geography. There is a river called the Ganga River, and that's where the word ganja comes from, because it grew along the Ganga.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know.
And it seems to me that people aren't aware of a lot of these different levels, because the cannabis topic is ridiculously complex. It's not complicated, it's just complex. There's a lot of different facets, a lot of interesting things, and that's why you can actually get addicted, ladies and gentlemen, not to cannabis itself, but on the researching into the things that cannabis can do and what it has done throughout the history of mankind. It is our very first ever cultivated crop.
Yep, I highly recommend people look or read
The
Jack
Emperor
Heron's
Wears
book,
No Clothes.
The Emperor Wears No Clothes. It's a great publication. You can read it online for free, and it covers the history of cannabis, the plant. It covers the medicinal side of it. It covers the build up to prohibition. It covers all aspects, to the point where he had a challenge that he would pay $100,000 to anybody who could find one fact in his book wrong. And for all the years that he was alive, no one could claim on that. So that tells me straight away that everything in his publication is fact. So if you don't know much about cannabis or you want to expand your knowledge on cannabis, I do highly recommend reading Jack Herer's The Emperor Wears No Clothes. It's an amazing book, and it's an eye-opener. Every time I loan my copy to people, they come back out, they've changed. They say, I didn't know any of that. Oh my God, that was amazing. Really? So why is it illegal? It's illegal because it's a marketing campaign to keep cotton and bleached tree paper and a few other things going, and synthetic fibers.
Money and power, Beauty and the Beast, tale as old as time.
Yeah, that's the one, mate. That's the one. Well, hey, look, Vinny, it's been great talking with you. It's a lovely day outside. I'm definitely going to go out and check that out.
All right, excellent. Now, just want to remind ladies and gentlemen that we are doing these podcasts every week, and we'll be having some guests on as well as other members of the party to come on and have a chat so you can familiarise yourself with the crew that we've got working here. If you want to support the party, you can go to alcp.org.nz for the old Freedom, Truth and Justice banner there. And we have a support page where we're hoping that people can sign up to become a member of the Legalise Cannabis Party and donate through the official Kiwi Bank account there, and PayPal and Patreon options as well. Bear in mind as well that the Legalise Cannabis Party is on Facebook, so facebook.com/AOTEAROA LCP, and we have a number of posts in there that Stephen's been putting up, as well as videos, including our first podcast here, and dozens of others to help you get informed about the party and about the facts on cannabis. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Vinny Eastwood, and you've also been listening to Stephen Wilkinson, the president of the ALCP.